Where are you? Are you in a library there in Minneapolis?
No, I'm in this awesome co-working space.
That's an astounding co-working space. So you're in a co-working facility that looks like an airplane hangar in Minneapolis, and I presume you rode your bicycle there today. Is that correct? There, that's
Indeed.
affirmative.
Affirmative.
A brave inspiration. Well, hey, Nick, I will let you take it away. I imagine you will introduce yourself as you go, and then we'll pick up the conversation in a bit. Sound good?
All right, everyone. So thanks for having me. I'm going to, share these pages later, so I'm not going to read every word to you, but I do want to have a little bit of an introduction. So I'm originally from the field of actuarial science, which has been a long time since then. But I've been in people analytics and workforce planning for a while. Joined One Model at the beginning of this year, the famous year of 2020. One Model's a people analytics platform company, and we have a really fantastic AI and machine learning element to that, and I will reference that a little bit later. Let me tell you what I want to cover today, and I think this may take, I'm not sure if the time's going to split up exactly this way. I think there's going to be a little bit faster at the beginning, and we'll have a little bit more kind of discussion Q&A toward the end. So we'll walk through an example of a diversity storyboard. I want to describe a couple of things that we're doing into 2021. Then I want to get to the heart of this, which is the turning radius of your organization and building basic kind of scenario model. There's going to be just a little bit of math in there. Some of it you're going to have to answer some questions on. So excuse me, I don't know if you saw it in there, but I did teach high school math for a while. And so I tend to seize these opportunities to inject a little bit of that. So let's talk about just a basic diversity storyboard. We like this one. It's in our demo environment, and it seeks to answer a handful of questions. And these are just some of the high level questions. And so storyboards are a little bit different than dashboards in that they are really trying to present questions and then demonstrate the, with the data, the answers to those questions. So this is how we've kind of organized this. And so this is really using different slices of metrics to understand the gender and ethnic composition, the changes over time, the ins and outs, and how that balance is changing. But what I wanted to focus on for a second, and you probably can't read all these numbers, and that's okay, you can see the slides later, is that what's the projected diversity at the end of the year? What are the drivers of attrition? These things are where we are pointing a whole bunch of data science resources right now so that we can do more advanced projections. And these projections will use basically like a Bayesian model, because what you have is there's three things that'll change the composition of your workforce. Are you growing or shrinking? What is the mix of the outbound flows? What is the mix of the inbound flows? Outbound flows being like, attrition, and the inbound flows being hiring, okay? That's at a system level. Once you're inside and you're breaking this into different layers of the organization, management layer and non-management, et cetera, or senior executives, which are super important views to look at. Then you have another in and out, which is people changing levels. Quick endorsement. This book called Thinking in Systems, with this fancy thing, is super good. Talking about stocks and flows really helps to get kind of a good orientation around this stuff. Okay, so that's kind of the basics. Let's talk about the turning radius of your organization's diversity. We're going to do this with just a quick image and then a question for you. So don't look in a dictionary for this, because I sort of invented this definition, but it's the smallest, tightest turn or the change possible within an existing system. And so we're talking about change here. And so you look at this aircraft carrier in the turning radius of it. This one is doing quite well, actually. It's a pretty tight turn. But you have to think about what is the limit, what is the tightest turn we can have in our organization? What's the fastest rate of change that we can achieve? And then how can we look at that and find out how to make that a little bit faster? So what is the radius right now? And what is the radius we want? And then we have to think about if things continue as they're going right now, what is it going to look like? Where are we going to end up? And what are the physical constraints of the current system? There are upper and lower bounds that represent kind of the realistic maximum and minimum of the futures that are out there. And we need to know this stuff. And there's some reasons that we need to know this as people analytics professionals, because the organizations are looking to us to help them evaluate if a target setting is realistic. We sometimes have to intervene where people say unrealistic things. I have some examples in my past where people have said things like, we're going to have 20,000 women in engineering by 2020. Okay, didn't happen. And the math would have shown that that was like really not exactly in the cards. And it's not to say that we want to hold back on these initiatives. We just need to have the analytical fortitude to say, where can we move the organization and how can we tighten that up? What is our best chance of doing it? So I'm going to test your math here. I told you this is going to be a little bit of a classroom environment, and the whiteboard's coming out next. So picture an organization that's 30% female. Maybe it's an entire company, it's a tech company, or it's an industrial or something. And there's no difference in the attrition rate between male and female. Very good, it's low for both, it's 5%. So there's no discrepancies there. And we're hiring 50% of our hires are females, okay? Which is 20 clicks above current composition. So it's a pretty significant thing for an organization to have a 30-70 in the workforce and hiring 50% females going forward. So well done. Maybe it might be something that's taken them a lot of effort to get to, and here we go. Now, in 3 years, I don't know if I can't see the chat window, I don't think, but I want you to kind of write this down on a piece of paper, or just take your hand and put your letter down there. What's the diversity going to be in the future? Okay, is it going to go down? No, because the incoming mix is higher than the current mix. Is it going to stay flat? No, for the same reason. So it's either C, D, or E. And this is in 3 years. So it's a bit of time to hold this change in place, to keep that lever pulled at 50%. The answer is really difficult to accept. And organizations that are saying, look, we're 50-50 and we're working our butts off to get there, and you're telling me that we're only going to get 3 points higher than we are now over that period of time? The answer is yes. That's the turning radius of the organization at work. And again, it doesn't matter what the size of the organization is, these numbers work out. So now I don't want to be like a big downer on everyone, but I do think it is important for us to be, as people analytics professionals, to ensure that the organization understands the math, understands what's happening, what's behind the numbers. And then there's layers beneath that, which we'll come to in a second. But this surprised me. And I've run these kinds of numbers a whole bunch of times, and I still, it hurts me to see that much effort just doesn't move things that much. Of course, if the organization is growing, you have a whole bunch more opportunities and things can move faster. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing for a second because I wanna show you how I would handle this in this situation. All right, so, here's the scoop. We're gonna run through this, and I'm gonna tell you where you can find an Excel version of this, because this is what we all need to be doing before we get into 2021. What is the end of year diversity going to be? Everybody should know this already. So this is our problem. 300, 700 males, 1,000 total, 30% female, just like we talked about, right? Okay. And then there's a 5% attrition rate for males and females. So I'm going to call it negative, so that because this is going to be negative 15, 5% of that is 35. So we lose 50 people. We're trying to stay flat. If you put growth into this, it changes things a little bit. That's all good. Let's just keep it flat. So we lost 50 people, but we want to stay at 1,000, which means we're going to have to hire 50 people. Okay. So now we have to hire 50 people. Our mix is 50-50. That means we're going to have plus 25 there and plus 25 there. That totals 50. Great. So then we come over to our numbers here. We started with 300, and we're going to subtract 15 and add 25. And what do we end up with? 310. We're going to subtract 35. We're going to add 25. We end up at 690. So we're still at 1,000, but here it is. 31% after 1 year, right? So this is what I'm talking about, that this is, you know, even with this kind of effect going on, where we've switched from a 30% number to a 50% number, just a big lever being pulled, it's going to generate 1%. And it's just, we have to get our arms around this. We have to know that this is what's happening. Now, you know, you could play around with this and say, what if the attrition is 0 for female and this is 100%? And you can see that you end up with these, you know, kind of the, you know, the min-max of this ends up at like 46 and 23% in the most insane situations. But our realm of reality is really somewhere in between. Now, what are the levers? What we're going to get to on this is, what are the levers that we have to pull here? What are the levers we have to pull here? Those are the only two kind of lever categories that we're going to have to play with that. All right, so now I'm going to sit back down. Told you we'd have some fun with whiteboards. Hang on one second, let me go back to this presentation. Dale's a great sport for humoring me. Okay. So when we talk about increasing retention or decreasing attrition, what are the drivers? So what are the drivers inside our model? Like, what's driving this number? If this were 10%, we'd have a lot more problem going on here. The diversity would probably be dropping. What are the drivers of that number? Okay. And which ones can we change? So if we know which drivers are there, we have some idea, we can probably change this driver more than we could change this driver. Those are strategic conversations. They're grounded in math, but about how much do we think we can change them? So we have to have some idea to run scenarios using basic model, run a scenario on this, and then, you know, how would those changes be made? Who would own the actions? And what impact might it have? Okay. Shifting the hiring mix. What's the diversity of this is to shift this, to pull the lever on hiring. What's the applicant pool look like? How does it compare to external markets? And are there pinch points? Do we lose diverse talent somewhere in the talent acquisition process? So again, same questions, that's why they're not bolded, but how would we make the changes? Who's gonna own them? What impact can we expect to have? I remember, you know, just my friend Brent, who was speaking just a couple of people before this, talked about who's going to own the actions. This is a tough question. I don't think people analytics owns the actions, but when we have, and prior to that, someone talking about design thinking, we've got to be helping to design some of those things. We have to be involved in saying, look, here is a suggestion on this. Let's do some analysis on what might happen if we do these different things. And I want to, before I move on to the next page, I want to remind you that we're doing this, it's really, the simple example is doing this on male, female, just because there's only 2 flavors. You can do this for ethnic diversity. It's the same thing. In fact, the way that I've done it in a large enough organization is to say male, white, male, Hispanic, male, African American, male, Asian, male, Native, male, other, female, and then you have all those slices, and you kind of play with that whole mix going forward. And then you can get all the different cuts and look at how is that going to pan out. Moving on. Summarizing this. Know the system you're in. This is the system we're in that I made up. Know the system you're in and share it. Make sure your key partners understand the system you're in, take the time to explain it. Create context with external data. We did not do that today, but know what the external data is. And it has to be relevant for your geography and the function of the roles you're talking about, not necessarily your industry. Remember, you compete for talent across industries. Find the levers of change, not excuses. Okay, this is, when we talk about the turning radius, it's not because we want to say what we can't do. We want to find what are the levers we can pull that are actually going to bend things. Engage the partners who will own the actions and challenge them to make this happen. Challenge them to, in the talent management space, in the recruiting space, okay? Challenge folks in the compensation area, et cetera. You're gonna have to find where those levers are, who is gonna be the owner of those levers, and engage them directly. And then monitor the challenge, or monitor the changes. Be ready to pivot, and also to celebrate as you make progress. You can only celebrate the progress if you know what progress is. And that kind of gets us back to, again, the turning radius concept. So Q&A might just be discussion with Al. And then I'm gonna just show one more page. Hang on, Al. And this is the solution, so just as a good teacher will give you the answers after you've already got the question wrong. Al, I'm going to ask you what your answer was in a second. But the solution is we'll put a blog and video of this stuff out on our site this week. And you'll be able to just download this thing. And then you can play with all the numbers and you can see the kind of the what happens. And just, put your own numbers in there if you want, but it's going to be an Excel thing. We're building all of this kind of capability right into our tool set at the beginning of next year. Okay.
I was, when you said whiteboard, I was thinking that you're going to have an electronic whiteboard and or something like that. I'm like, no, man, he's going old school. He's bringing the whiteboard out.
Yeah, this is it, man. This is it. I don't know what's on the other side. Oh, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and I don't know how you got that on your bike. That's another story. But hey, thank you for sharing like you did, and also thank you for bringing up a variety of topics. How refreshing it is just to see the simple math behind it, so you understand some of the constraints in moving forward. So I mean, that was a great narrative that you put together. The other thing I just wanted to say as well is that this notion of scenario planning adjacent to, if not integrated with, workforce planning has been long discussed. It's been on again, off again. But when you were going through your narrative, it spoke to the ability to do scenario planning, what if analysis. Is that something that you're seeing more of? Is this something that you advocate so you can understand the trade-offs and make wiser decisions?
Definitely something I advocate. And yes, it's something that we are hearing as working for a product company now. We are hearing this coming from our prospects and our customers of more and more interest in that. And so what does that tell you? It says that I don't think it's just a people analytics team sitting around saying, I want to just do some scenarios. I think the demands are there from the business to say, help me make some decisions. And to make decisions, I often think of this stuff very kind of spatially in terms of topography of the problem. So that includes things like the turning radius, or what is the learning curve, or kind of, so where are the challenges? So when we say scenarios where we're going to like run a few different things, we're basically putting different flags on there and finding out which ones are easier, tougher, more or less likely. What happens if we go into this area? What kind of terrain should we expect from a talent landscape? So that's how I kind of picture those things. And that's why I do think that this is starting to come up. And you saw from Stacey Harris's presentation that increased interest in workforce planning.
Yeah.
And we're hearing that as well. I think that comes from the sudden need for agility that wasn't really, on the menu before the pandemic.
Well, hey, a couple of things, because we do have some time, and I want to make sure we land the plane, with you. So no rush, Nick. There's a gentleman who also just joined us who has a thing or two to say about workforce planning. Have you met Dan George?
Yes, I think so. Hi, hello there, Daniel.
Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Good.
So, I'm shuddering about, flashback to Nashville when pre-COVID times.
Yes.
We'll save that for another story, another day. But what I want to do is really sink into something, because I think it would be a good transition to what Dan is going to be talking about today. This idea that progress has come up several times a day, particularly with regards to diversity. And then it invites the question, what does progress look like? And you just highlighted that you might be doing a heck of a lot. You might be thinking that, you're rocking it, yet the outcome measures are incremental. And, if somebody sees that or is even held accountable to that, then they could be, unfairly, what's the word I'm looking for?
Evaluated.
Unfairly persecuted. You get the idea.
Yeah.
What do you have to say, about that dynamic, about setting reasonable goals? And, it would be great if we waved a wand and everything would be, equitable and, but that's not going to happen. We do have to make things. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, for any other goal setting activity, when, unrealistic goals lead to kind of abandonment or forfeiture, people just say, well, I can't get that, so I'll stop. I'm going to have to earn my, performance review points somewhere else, because that one's done, and then they stop. So you do have to have stretch and also be attainable. You have to provide the tools to go with it. And so we're looking at what this thing is, just a kind of a macro example of a small company, 1,000 people. I think that the nuance of the levels of the organization and the upward movement is of equal need for analytics. Is what is our upward flow inside the organization? Mm-hmm. And so that's also something that you can run through scenarios and things. The idea that scenarios is to say, how can I unpack this system to identify the levers and sub-levers so that I know what am I pulling, why, how, and how can I measure it? And that's why we want to do these scenarios, because we want to decompose the system into the pieces to understand how we can affect it. So progress to me is seeing things moving at a tightening turning radius from what they were. Okay? So if you're already on a decent trajectory, you've got tailwinds. Look at the renewable energy sector. You can't take credit for the fact that wind is growing by so much, because it's already kind of got its own tailwinds. Right. But if you want to claim progress there, you've got to be bending the stuff faster than what it was already naturally going to do. Mm-hmm. That's progress. Progress is not just riding tailwinds.
I like it. That's a very clear mental model, and I think a healthy one at that, particularly if you, as a leader, you aspire to be an organization who's perceived, rightly so, to be an advocate for diversity and inclusion, and in fact, in outcompete your competitors. Actually, just put more effort and energy, have success towards that end. So, yeah, I really like it. One more question before we segue over to Dan. Yeah, and we've talked about this in some cases before, but it's really with COVID, all these tiger teams got spun up and crisis management teams, and they've been diverse insofar as that they've had facilities and legal and HR and a variety of other functions that formerly did not meet with the same level of frequency, with the same mandate. And so when we talk about workforce planning, which relates to the scenario that you just shared around hiring, it also involves obviously retention and performance and workload management, all that. So my question is around, from your perspective in facilitating these discussions, particularly with data-driven insight, are you an advocate of these groups meeting more frequently, being standing bodies that are formulating workplace strategy? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I believe very much in kind of ad hoc standing groups. So while, with a specific mission and then a clear point of when is this over?
Yeah.
So I think that should be part of the case. And I think that the problems they're solving in many of these cases are related to systems, how many people can be online, reductions, space constraints or space, excess that they have. And there's a bunch of things that they're trying to solve. I think that the thing I'm really concerned about is, are we doing enough with equity in terms of how people are being affected by this? And it is something that affects the diverse members of the workforce. It's something that affects young parents, even if they are parents of means, if they can't put their kids in the school. There's a lot of, so when I've talked about things like predicting attrition in the last few months, people are like, our attrition is really low, we don't need to worry about that anymore. My answer is, yes, you do, because you may have it low overall, but the people that are leaving right now are people that you worked really hard to track, because the impacts of the pandemic, economically, socially, are disproportionately falling onto women of color, communities of color. That's where, because they're essential workers, because of the industries that they're concentrated in, all these reasons. So this is really critical to get your arms around attrition. What are the drivers of attrition in this kind of context as well? But what's going on? Because that is something that you may say like, hey, attrition is no big deal anymore, nobody leaves. But it's not true.
Yeah.
It's just some people are staying on more and some other people are leaving more.
Yeah. Well, Nick, again, thank you for doing what you do. Thanks for sharing. I love the scenario that you put forth, the use of the whiteboard, top notch, obviously. And
my pleasure.
Since you brought it up there at the end, since we're fellow parents of a soon to be 20-year-old.
Exactly. 20 years old in 2020 on the 20th day. And that's it for the warm-up act. I'm going to turn it over now that I've warmed up the stage for Mr. Dan George, my buddy. All right. Thanks again. Great to see you.
Yeah. Right. Take care, buddy.